It is no mystery to many these days that Mortal Kombat 9 is an iconic title, rich in history and so many tales of what used to be. However, it can be very hard to actually see and experience the older days of this game in 2024. That being said, this hasn't stopped me for today's video, as I've been able to access the vanilla version of Mortal Kombat 9 for the purpose of showing all of you just how wild this game actually was when it first dropped, before any kind of balance patches hit the scene. So, sit back and enjoy the video, because it's going to get wild. However, before we start, I am very happy to say that this video is sponsored. Hi everyone, now it's been a while since you've seen my face on this channel I think, but trust me, there's a really good reason for my ugly mug to be back in front of your face. This video is brought to you by the wonderful folks over at Manscaped, the finest company around for all of your groin and body hair removal needs. So, you know, trimmers and stuff. Manscaped is partnering with the Testicular Cancer Society, and in doing that, the product I have to show you for this video is the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. It very much does take care of all of your body hair removal needs, as well as various devices that can make things just a little bit more comfortable for an otherwise rather uncomfortable experience for some people. I would like to extend a massive thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this video, and if you want to get involved yourself, feel free to check the bottom of the screen for a promo code that can assist you, as well as various information in the pinned comment and the video description. Now, without further ado, I'd say it's time to get stuck in to some old school Mortal Kombat 9. So, the first thing I want to do here is explain how I managed to put this together. It is pretty difficult to get an original version of a game from the 360 era because of patches, updates, different release versions, like even this game has the Complete Edition, which is already a few patches ahead due to DLC and stuff. But either way, here's what I did to accomplish it. I took an Xbox 360 and I deleted any save data or console data for MK9 that may have been on the system first. This started me off with an absolute clean slate. Then, having the console offline and not connected to the internet in any way, I ran the base version of MK9, and what this did was run the game at its absolute first version. So the game you're about to see is fully as things were at the absolute beginning. Now, there is a chance that because there was no day one patch applied here, that you're going to see the game as more of a slightly pre-vanilla version, as remember, day one patches often change quite a lot, especially for fighting games. But we're going to have to roll with that, as it was either that or nothing when looking at vanilla MK9, so hopefully that's okay with you. At least we can check out the game in high quality this time, as remember, capture devices have come a long way since 2011, so that's kind of exciting. It is also worth mentioning that because this is base MK9, there is no DLC, so I cannot talk about Rain, Kenshi, Freddy, or Scarlet. A bit of a shame because they were kind of wild when they came out, but those versions definitely lost in time. Finally, this is the 360 version, so there is no Kratos either. To begin with, let's talk about movement, because there was actually one specific thing that characters could do when the game first came out, which was move forward at a much faster pace. This is because at first, a forward dash could essentially be cancelled into another forward dash. Cancelling dashes was a common thing in MK9, whether you cancelled into block, a button, or a special. It makes the movement fast and responsive, and it's one of the things that people like the most when looking back on this game. But being able to cancel a dash into another dash, however, was a technique that saw characters advance much faster across the board, making it a very aggressive kind of game within dash range. This technique would be removed from the game a few months in, and that would hinder some characters that really liked this forward movement. And when people talk about the dash nerf in MK9, this is what they're referring to, a fast-moving technique that you can no longer perform. You can still move fast using the dash block technique, but the original dash tech is no longer in the game. Secondly, the plus frames of a standard jump-in punch were way higher in vanilla, so much so that a blocked jump-in punch would almost always grant a free throw attempt for the aggressor. The The plus frames here were kind of ridiculous, and a change would be made to, although you can still jail into combo strings from a jump-in punch, the plus frames of the move itself when used standalone would be cut down. This introduced a slight shift to the jump meta, where use of a super deep jump kick would essentially have the old plus frames of the punch, replacing it in function. Beforehand, it was much easier. Land a jump-in punch, get a free mix-up. But all of these things here are of a basic level. The overall game, no matter the character. Now, for the rest of the video, I want to go over as many characters as I can remember, trying to tell you about how different many of these characters were. So, to begin with, I should start with Baraka, I suppose. He was absolutely dreadful when this game first came out. Seriously, this character was more of an NPC when it comes to lack of combos and terrible frame data. To start with, Baraka's down 1 was a stubby, short-range, run-of-the-mill low poke. It wouldn't be until later that a blade was added to this move to give it just a bit more range. Secondly, his enhanced blade charge had the same distance as the regular one, making it a not-so-good option at punishing projectiles and stuff. In general, Baraka's damage was overall extremely low compared to other characters, with some patch notes mentioning that extra damage was given to various attacks and specials later down the line. But the biggest thing that hurt here was that Baraka had no combos. Back 3-1, the low launcher, wasn't actually a true launcher originally. You barely had enough time to get a blade charge after that move. And the EX down forward 1 was way less useful as a combo tool because of the other moves working alongside it were not in the final version that we have now. Things went less distance, they did less damage. Overall, the combos were terrible. Now, Baraka was already a pretty slow character, but slow with awful damage, awful combos, and bad whiff punishment, that's not a combination you want to deal with. It is possible in this version of the game that Baraka might actually be the worst character in the roster. Here's a cool one though. No pun intended, I guess. It's SubZero. This character was a bit more damaging on the first release for one major reason. His ground freeze was actually a usable move, how about that? The standard version was still pretty terrible, but there were certain circumstances that the enhanced ground freeze would actually recapture the opponent, and provide more combo options or setup, if that's what you want. But the most common occurrence here would be from 2-1-2. 2-1-2 into your standard freeze, into EX ground freeze, recaptured, letting you either end the combo from here, or, more infamously, time a charged back 2 to reset the combo into over half-life damage. Now, there were things in place where the refreeze off back 2 wouldn't always work. Had something to do with the opponent holding block or something that would often prevent the freeze from happening after back 2, but if they get caught, it's huge damage for a standing button and only 1 bar of super meter. But sadly, not long after this existed, EX ground freeze would just straight up no longer work like this. It would simply end combos then and there, and after this the move basically vanished from existence because of those changes. There were some other minor differences as well for this character. The enhanced slide didn't have armor to begin with, and the standard freeze would actually last for 10 frames less on hit. These frames were later added to give SubZero a bit more time to trade favorably with projectiles and stuff. A big thing about Katana earlier on was that she definitely had a lot more damage. This is mostly due to her enhanced fan toss on the ground that you can actually dash cancel after the first hit with. You can loop this for as long as you have meter to do so, and you can still do that today. But what this means is, loop the grounded fan toss 3 times after a string, then just go in for your standard combo. Now, I never played Katana, so what you're seeing here is definitely not optimal. However, these combos all did way more damage at the beginning versus what they do now. Katana is absolutely a zoner in this game. Like, she does have some up-close tools, but her fan toss, her instant air game plan, it's a huge part of the character. And I suppose having 60% plus combos wasn't really the idea here, so eventually the combo damage would be scaled a lot more than what it was at the beginning. Speaking of scaling, or should I say lack of, let's talk about Kung Lao for a second. Kung Lao was, in my opinion, the original menace of MK9. This character at the very beginning was ludicrous for a number of reasons. The first thing I want to show you is his combo game. Kung Lao's combos when this game first came out were not okay. Whether that's down to a lack of combo scaling, way more freedom and juggle potential from certain moves, the whole thing was a nightmare to fight against. Take this infamous corner route for example. Kung Lao's dive kick pretty much never altered combo gravity. It was the same juggle almost every time. You could do like 4 dive kicks, 2 enhanced hat tosses. You could bag like 75% damage for a single corner combo. Now I don't really have the execution to go all the way with that, but go and watch any old Czech combo video and you'll see exactly what I mean. Getting hit in the corner was probably game over for whoever was on the receiving end of the character. And nowadays, you can't really get more than like 1 dive kick in a combo before the whole thing ends for you. Not only that, but Kung Lao had an actual infinite off his teleport. It was just standing 2 teleport, the 3 follow-up, into standing 2 teleport again. The whole thing would infinite if you had the timing down, and it didn't scale, so clearly not meant to be there. It can shred a life bar in a matter of seconds, and really isn't that tricky. One of the easier infinites I've ever performed. The final thing I want to mention about Lao Day 1 is the spin. Oh my lord, the spin. This move Day 1 was so annoying because it was way harder to punish. The pushback on this move was absolutely ridiculous. So many characters would struggle to just punish this thing in the first place, for the reward of a successful spin on Lao's part to be crazy pre-patch combo damage. Not to mention the fact that this was also a wake-up attack, and it was also extremely fast. Lao players would just mash this without thinking, and it's almost safe, so who cares? This version of Lao was probably the #1 character. If he wasn't, he was definitely up there with some others. Various changes would happen over the months, but on launch, I gotta tell you, Kung Lao was a serious threat. So, Johnny Cage was technically worse at full screen on launch. His enhanced shadow kick didn't have armor back in the day, so he lacked anything to get in when he saw a projectile. But this wasn't the end of the world. He somehow had even better up-close tools than he has in the final version. The big one was that forward 3-2, a different string from forward 3, could actually combo into specials, most notably his nut punch. It just meant that the string was more usable for stuff like this, and confirming it into a super plus on hit restand that could guarantee more pressure was simply a lot better than it is now. But a major thing about launch Johnny Cage was that he had a significant glitch with his X-ray. It was a parry, right? But if you landed his parry, and then you just hold the X-ray input and down, the X-ray will come out again, no matter what. The opponent has to do ranged moves for things to just not get hit by this. Otherwise, Cage will literally just turtle up and X-ray you for any single hit you perform. This actually wasn't unique to Johnny Cage. It's an overall parry thing. I mean, for example, if SubZero lands something like EX Parry and holds the button and down the exact same way, EX Parry will constantly freeze the opponent as well. Obviously, it's just more extreme for Johnny Cage because it's a massive damage combo starting parry. So this is the one that people usually remember the most when they look back on Johnny Cage's broken parry X-ray. Jade was a weird one back then. One of her moves was way better, but another was significantly worse. So back on release, her up 3, which is her best standalone button due to its range, was actually a mid. The opponent can't crouch this, so it was a viable keep away tool that worked pretty well with the rest of her toolset. Unfortunately, this was not something that just made Jade better, as on release, Jade's EX glaive toss projectiles would actually not come back on block. They only returned on hit, and you still couldn't get a combo from this. So when a move is blocked, Jade didn't really have anything to start some offense, as limited as it was in the first place. Jade was never a strong character in this game, unfortunately. I think she's really cool, but she just always sat in that bottom 5. If she kept the mid-hitting up 3, that absolutely would have been better than nothing. And it's a shame that that move got nerfed the way it did. Shiva was dealing even less damage in general when this game came out. A variety of moves would be given less scaling and more damage to begin with, but a huge one for her was that her back to 1+2 string, where she kind of throws them into the air, wouldn't combo into air grab, which is in the final version a major part of her damage output. Shiva is already a weak character, so doing significantly less damage with more limited combos made her even worse than she already was. Not comboing from her back 2 meant that her low was less damaging, and her overhead grab, or strike I suppose, did not have the half-life damage that it is doing now. When it comes to Raiden, while in the final version Raiden is one of the more mid-tier characters, he was a lot more scary day one, and that was for a number of reasons. The first was that Vicinity Blast had more instances where it could jail on block. Patch notes of the past mentioning that there were various ways to guaranteed frame trap people into Vicinity Blast for more pressure. It wasn't just scary offense though, Raiden has less recovery on his teleport, which was really frustrating to deal with, and take that from me, I was there. Now, we have to remember that less recovery on certain moves may have been more manageable offline for some players, but the vast majority of players were online in delay-based netcode. So a teleport like this, having less recovery, means that you are not going to punish this thing. Maybe not even take your turn back should he miss it right in front of you. But Raiden overall was both harder to keep off of you because of Vicinity Blast pressure, and harder to keep away thanks to a much better teleport. Kabal was a character that, truth be told, wasn't fully discovered in his entirety by the community until a little bit later after launch, but he still had some stuff that would be removed in early patches, most notably some insane block pressure from a Nomad Dash cancelled few buttons. One button in particular that is said in patch notes to be toned down to remove unescapable block pressure was his standing 4. This move beforehand was much scarier on block, and it would be way harder to avoid up close, if at all, to be honest. So Kabal remained very much a similar character, but some of the plus frames on certain moves would be toned down. Many of them would still be plus, and you can armor, maybe interrupt, but the almost infinite situations would be removed. Quan Chi did not have armor on his enhanced sky drop in the beginning, and there would be some changes also made to his trance, said in patch notes to avoid unescapable infinite situations. Now you gotta remember that some of these changes weren't actually necessarily to the 1v1 portion. Some character changes were there to prevent tag mode infinites, and I think that with Quan Chi this is one of them. For example, trance into close noob Cybot portal, into tag, into trance, into rinse repeat, was once upon a time an infinite. Tag had quite a few of these situations, but as vanilla mechanics and characters are mostly here to give you more of a competitive history of the game, I won't really be mentioning tag in this video. Maybe one day if you really want to know enough. I still have the game here, so let me know in the comments. Jax used to have weaker defensive options. Patch after patch would eventually add armor to certain characters, and Jax was given quite a few of these upgrades. In vanilla Mortal Kombat 9, the armor on Jax's enhanced dash punch and even his X-ray would not start instantly, leaving a small window where the attack would lose to anything the opponent was doing if it was meaty enough. As you can imagine, not having instant armor was a huge issue for the character, and gaining instant armor was a much needed improvement. But it wasn't just these two moves that suffered early in the game. His down-up 4 elbow strike didn't have armor at all on the enhanced version. This is another thing that would be added later down the line, making this character weaker on defense to begin with, but would eventually become a little bit stronger. I'm glad that they gave him the armor because in hindsight, he really needed it. The one thing Jax did have was a gotcha grab that was plus on block, but this would be removed in the same patch that the armor was given to him. There was somewhat of a trade-off here, as his advancing forward 3 mid at the time would become an overhead instead. And finally, we kinda have to end the video on a character that was a menace from day one, and that is Cyrax. If I didn't talk about Cyrax, I absolutely would have had a bunch of unhappy people in the comment section, so it makes sense. Cyrax had a variety of different tools in the game, right? And it was one of the main reasons the character was never outside of the top 3. But in the very first version of this game, one technique in particular would reign supreme, and be to date one of the most busted things in any NRS game. That is called the bomb trap. This technique involved Cyrax's command grab, which on launch had a tiny window to successfully break. It may as well have been untechable, you had such little time. But when this move connected and you did the 2-1-2 extension, it was super plus. So much so that Cyrax had time to do a command grab, dash in medium bomb, which was unblockable, and then perform a 2-2 string that jailed on block or hit into the explosion and gave the character over half-life damage for no resources. Of all the things removed from the game, the bomb trap was one of the absolute first things to go. But it didn't mean that it didn't have its first few tournaments to do damage in competitive play, and get people started nice and early at getting mad at Cyrax right off the bat. There were always other things that Cyrax could do across all the different patches, but the most immediate piece of broken Cyrax tech that people always look back on is the command grab that gave Cyrax half-life damage and more. Even more hilarious when you remember that Cyrax was the only character in the game with a command grab that wasn't an X-ray. How does that even work? It is absolutely ludicrous. But overall, this video was a look into the insanity and wild times that vanilla MK9 provided. Now, I haven't actually made a video on an early version of a game in quite some time. I'll be honest, it's quite a lot of effort to set everything up, but I've really enjoyed revisiting a time where this game was brand new and everyone was just kind of exploring stuff at the same time. It's been a pleasant experience and a real nostalgia trip for someone who started competitively with this game. If you want more looks into vanilla or early versions of NRS titles, please let me know, and I would like to extend one more giant thank you to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. The support goes a really long way, and if you want to find out more information, once again, I will remind you to check the video description and pinned comment. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Take care.